the next session, which is really just looking at how do we pull together some of the thoughts that the GNC had in terms of the forecasting work. On the agenda, we did have Francesco, who was going to present on some of the future directions of the IPC work, but unfortunately is unable to attend. So we will move to the next session, which was Anna, who will give us an overview of how the GNC is thinking about moving forward with the forecasting. This presentation will, set the scene for us in the following sessions, which will be looking at discussions on how we can, concretely identify some of the next steps in terms of moving this work forward. So Anna, over to you.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you, everybody. So yes, as Louise mentioned, this is more like our dream of what we think we can do, and let's discuss later whether that dream is actually reasonable or no. Also, a disclosure, I did use some elements of this presentation for one of my assignments during executive MBA, so sometimes it does look a little bit promotional, but bear with me, please. So our initial thinking was, let me figure out how to move it. Our initial thinking was that, similarly like many of you, that because we don't have now timely malnutrition data to predict and to organize when and how we have to provide assistance, because of different reasons, we thought that there might be a possibility to, based on any other data that we might have, to actually predict what should be the rate of malnutrition or any other indicators that we want as a nutrition community. Now, we did have some very preliminary discussion with CDC, where they said that they did at some point look at the individual level for the prediction of malnutrition, and they use different indicators specifically for the food security, but I think also for health and WASH. And at the individual level, they have not found any correlation. It was not a machine learning prediction, it just was statistical models. But they said they're happy to relook at it again, but possibly that's not the best approach. So what we thought is that we could look at the population level and going and defining at what population level we want to look to get this information for the possible prediction. Yeah, so the reason is basically so we can monitor in real time, but also to have early warning system to provide timely response for us when and how to intervene. So the idea is that we do have eventually a global level system with probably not all countries, but the key countries for which using these prediction models, we can monitor at different level nutritional indicators. We will probably have to start with 1 or 2 countries, but the idea is that this will be a system for the overall monitoring of the situation, and then when we need, we might go and do additional smart assessments, for example, or actually do the assessments in specific areas when we need it. But at least we would have some way of having an overall picture of what is going on in countries. Now, we did think of it as based on the conceptual framework for malnutrition. I will allow me to very quickly go through it, because I know that we have very few non-nutritionists on the call, so that we bring everybody on the same page. Sorry for repeating this again. So we do have a framework which defines that maternal and child malnutrition and possibly death also depends on the inadequate dietary intake and disease, which are immediate causes, and then they are in turn depend on what we call underlying causes, which is household food insecurity, inadequate care, and here we are looking at the infant feeding practices, for example, but also for for example, hygiene practices or everything related to the to knowing how to care for a child or for a person. And then the third group is unhealthy household environment and lack of health services. And here we, for example, would talk about lack of access to safe water. Now, all of this depends in itself in basic courses, which is basically goes eventually through income poverty, lack of capital, and up to the social and economic political context. So when we were thinking about our model, we thought that while we need to predict what is on the top, we might actually look at all the levels and find the best predictors to look at our outcome. Now, we plan to start with the global acute malnutrition question, just because that seems to be what we usually need and what changes more rapidly than, for example, breastfeeding practices. But eventually, we do want, if this works, to scale up it to cover different forms of malnutrition, micronutrients, also overweight and obesity, under 5 mortality probably, as well as infant and child feeding practices. And I'm probably talking about a horizon of several years at least. So the idea is to build a model that will be, as I mentioned, analyzing our outcome, which is to start with will be GAM, and correlating it with different causes of malnutrition. So we do want to make sure that we use both structured data and unstructured. So not only the surveys and not only the program data, which has a big components of it, but in order to get this kind of a more real-time prediction, we thought that we could also look if we can use some kind of unstructured data, which will probably also depend on a country. We were potentially looking at the satellite imagery, for example, and the news and tracking social media. So this is just an example of the structured data. So on the left, you see these components of the malnutrition framework, conceptual framework for malnutrition. And this is just some of the examples which we looked at. So again, it would depend at which level we can get those indicators. Most of them would be available at the country level. Most likely we can get to the admin 1 level, but sometimes for some of them, I think we could also find data which is even lower. And you see that we are not only focusing here on the standard humanitarian indicators, but also we're looking more holistically. So for example, a poverty rate, on unemployment rate, internet coverage, transportation network. So all those possible underlying and basic causes of malnutrition. Now, this is just an example, and there was no any in-depth discussion done about what indicators we want to use, but just to give to the overview of our thinking. And of course, in addition to that, program data would be very important for us to use. We currently don't use it very much in analyzing our data, mostly because the data is not complete. We don't get it soon. And to address this last concern, as a GNC, we are now developing a system based on the DHIS2, which is a standard Ministry of Health reporting system. So we are trying to develop a module on the nutrition in emergencies together with UNICEF that will be able to get data at individual level and then combine it all up to the global level. So potentially this lack of fast access to the program data would be solved, but we do still have some other issues, like for example, what if they have an increase in admissions, but or what if they just hired 10 additional health volunteers who brought more people to the facility? So we still need to look at that, but we think that there is a big potential to involve program data in that. So this is on the structured data. And then to ensure this real-time, more granular prediction, we thought to potentially look at the radio, press, social media, Google Trends. And also there is quite a lot of real-time satellite data, mostly often used for the predictions of the food insecurity, but also more and more it's now being used, for example, for WASH response. So we do think there is a huge amount of data that we can potentially utilize for our analysis. Yeah, this is just some examples. This is a farming landscape, and this is the flooding in South Sudan. More examples, for example, this slide, which I like very much, which shows dengue fever trends. So in orange, you would see dengue fever cases, and in blue, you see Google search volume for this. So as you can see, it's very nearly repeats the trend. So we do think that there is quite a lot of potential data that we can use from the Google trends and also through social media. And obviously we also want to, because radio is usually #1 media in Africa, we do want to also find out if it's possible and if it's needed, how we can use it for our predictive model, which would add another very difficult layer of complexity to solve in this algorithm. Yeah, so potentially combining all this, our structured data on the left and all this real-time data which we can get, we think that we could, that we could predict our outcomes, starting from wasting, in a near real time, possibly even with some lead time, which I think is possible based on the presentations which we had on the day 1 of the workshop. And we want to ensure higher granularity. So we are not interested as such as the country level data, and probably not even admin level data, because with more and more we see that there are, even in all these discussions of risk of famine, there are pockets of malnutrition, which with current methods is very difficult to detect. For example, we would do smart assessment at level 1 or level 2 admin, but it might be such a 1 or 2 villages where we have challenges. So we do hope that with this approach, we could go as much as possible granularly and get, if not at the village level, to hopefully at least level admin level 3. And again, I mentioned it's all our dreams. Now, yeah, I will start with that. These are some questions for the discussion which we thought to have with you. I don't know, Luis, how do you want to manage with the break and with the questions and answers and discussions? Thank you. Over.
Thanks, Anna, for the presentation. So maybe what I would propose, because I think we're going to have a detailed discussion in terms of the next steps after the break. So what I would suggest maybe so that people can, if they want to think of, a little bit more about some of the issues that you've raised in the presentation, if at first now we can just take any kind of questions related to the presentation, either clarifications or just additional questions for understanding, and then maybe then we take the break and come back and start looking at the proposed discussion in the next session. So, colleagues, are there any questions or clarifications for Anna on the presentation?
Maybe from my side, okay, Louise.
Yes, go ahead.
So Anna, did this social media, radio kind of data collection, was it used in any kind of predictions other than nutrition? Did it work? Or is this something that is a new idea that we're introducing that we want to test?
It was so. We didn't do extensive literature search, but based on the search which we've done, there is quite a lot of humanitarian even work where they use such methodologies, and according to publications, successfully, more or less, depending how you define success. And
okay,
sorry, maybe to add, sorry, before. So, and I think the idea would be probably just to start with some kind of structured data, all this assessment which we have program data, and then just increasing complexity slowly without looking at everything that I presented immediately. Sorry.
Okay, thanks, Anna. I see Said has a question.
Yeah, sorry, I need to update my Zoom. I don't know why I can't actually raise my hand like everyone else. Yeah, sorry, just two quick questions. The first is, well, first, thank you very much for the presentation. It was really interesting. I was wondering if you guys had discussed at all the idea of like representativeness of it, because if you're relying a lot on data sources such as social media, like in some contexts like Indonesia, I can see where that there's widespread mobile coverage and a lot of people will have access to that kind of thing. But what about in maybe other contexts where that might be a bit more of a challenge, where you don't have widespread cell service like a South Sudan or certain other countries? And I'm not saying it so much as a criticism, but I'm just wondering if it's something you guys have thought, and if there were any solutions, like maybe trying to, like you could complement maybe what you're doing with like a Rapid Pro, or that piggybacking onto some other existing systems that are already being used in that last mile kind of health thing. I was just wondering if that conversation had happened at all. And secondly, I was just curious, you mentioned that I think you'd worked with the CDC a little bit, and they'd already tried an individual level prediction, and they came to the conclusion it wasn't working well. I was just wondering if there were any of those results or any lessons learned from that that could be shared perhaps with the group or with other members if it was available. Sorry, that's over. Thank you.
So on the first point, first of all, we didn't go in depth, but it does make sense that we won't be able to use all the data throughout all the countries. How I see it, that we would likely have some core data which we have available already in most of the countries, and then to complement it, it might vary country by country. That's the only answer I can give now, and that's something that we also want to discuss later with people who will be involved in the project. And then in terms of the CDC, so the discussion was like a couple of years ago, and I think they did send me some publications. So I will try to find them, and then once I find, I'm happy to share it with everybody. It's a published data.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Anna.
I could see there was a point from Mara, which is just also slightly linked to what Said has mentioned in terms of using the unstructured data and how this will, the implications of this in areas where, there's limited connectivity. I don't know, Mara, do you want to speak, or that's clear?
Yeah, sorry, it's similar to the question Said had, so I think it's okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
There are two hands, I see, Kutab and Barbara.
Okay, I'm also not able to see the hands. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Okay,
no,
go
sorry,
ahead.
This one is the old one. Let me. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Can I come in? This is Bara. Yes, thanks, Anna, for the great presentation. Just maybe I missed something, or just to clarify. Sorry. To what extent this new methodology that you are explaining to us today complements other methodology that were presented maybe today or last week? I'm thinking particularly of IPC. I don't know, maybe the way you presented, because you started with the nutrition framework, and this is also the basis of the IPC malnutrition. So maybe this is why I see more complementarity with IPC, but even with all the methodology presented today. So how do you see this complementarity? how do we think of working together and not adding like a complete new methodology, but more like, I don't know, IPC 4.0, or I don't know, you know, something like that could complement something that pre-exists and that has been used and proven its results.
Excellent question, and I guess it goes right to the finalization of the workshop. But we do hope that we can work with all of you, and that's why we also invited you, not only so that you present what you do, but also to learn from you. And we do hope that this system will be able to build on everything what was already done. And we do hope that we can find a way, for example, through a task force, to work together with all of you on that. Louise, was it too early to mention that?
Yeah, I think Barbara's last comment was really what some of the things that we would want to unpack in the next session, in the next discussion, because really I think now it's the intent was to find out what is out there, to listen from those initiatives, and then try to see as a group together what would be some of the work that we can carry forward. So I think in Anna's presentation on the last slide, it was now really like practical questions in terms of how we can move this forward. And I think the point that you've raised is very, Barbara, is very linked to what we would want to discuss in the next session. Because obviously the aim would be, you know, the easiest way out. So if that means that we already have something existing and, you know, we need to just make some adjustments to be able to move forward, or with some of the work that's been done, you know, that's what we would be open to. And of course, there's like Anna has mentioned, there's also a lot of learning that we would be able to pick up from some of the initiatives that have already been done. And so we would also want to tap into that and see what would be the best way for us to take this forward, so that we can address this gap, which is, it's actually a gap that we see specifically within these fragile contexts. So I think,
sorry.
Yes, Anna.
So there is a question from Mara, and then also Anceline wrote to me asking if they can present the work which they've been doing on in 2020 on burden revision in the context of COVID-19. And I was just wondering, because we kind of half an hour ahead of schedule, maybe we can do it also before the break. And in the meantime, I can answer Mara's question. Would that work?
Okay. So is the suggestion to do the presentation now?
I don't think it's a presentation, Anceline, right? You just want to explain the work. Anceline?
Yes. Yes, sorry. Yeah, we did not prepare anything, but I think that it could be interesting to share with you our experience in Wakaro during 2020. But if the timing is not good for you, we can plan to do it in another session. I don't know.
Okay, I think, like Anna said, I think we do have some few minutes. So maybe what I can propose is that then we would do it now, so that we take the break and then come back just for the discussions. So I do see that there's a question from, so maybe Mara, we could just hold, let Anceline do the presentation, and I think Anna will come back to you just to address the issue on CTC.
Maybe, sorry, maybe I'll just, because I'll answer it in 1 second and then we can focus on Anceline's. So no, Mara, we don't have a partner. When we had a discussion with CDC, it was on some workshop not related to our work, and they just advised us, they said they would potentially interested, but we have not approached them or any other institutional partner, also because we thought that it would be important for us to have this presentations. And then you would probably already working with some partners as well. So we want to build on everything what exists rather than starting something new. Over.
Okay, thanks. That was 1 second, indeed. So Anseli, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Just to share with you that we, UNICEF and WFP, developed a model in 2020 for estimating burden of acute malnutrition in the context of COVID-19. The model was generated based on experiences as well as lessons learned from previous burden analysis carried out on existing national and regional SAM admission data from the last 5 years, prevalence data from nutrition surveys, and food insecurity data from the Cadre Harmonisé. The mathematical model we used allow for the estimation of regionally appropriate incidence of correction factors per quarter, accounting for food insecurity, seasonal variation, and COVID-19. I don't have a very detailed presentation, but we can share any details after this decision, and we plan also to have a case study publication with ENN, so it could be interesting for you. But this approach was carried out at regional level and through clear and organized consultation and consensus with countries, so governments, non-governmental authorities and organizations were committed in this process. And it allows us to generate estimates, so in a coordinated manner. Obviously, the use of real-time data in the model would have produced far more robust and widely accepted burden estimates, but by applying standard calendar quarters, the model was, however, able to account for the seasonal variation observed in the burden of acute malnutrition, especially in the Sahel region. And maybe last and not least, in terms of field application, this model of burden estimates was used to conduct as well a hotspot analysis and to identify priority areas or hotspot areas in need of urgent assistance in 2020. And this hotspot analysis was based especially on the use of 23 indicators from nutrition, food security sectors, but also on aggravating factors such as conflict, population movements, and many other. And this analysis was based also on a ranking modeling using quartiles. So that was the only things I wanted to share with you, and we can share with you some document on that if you may need some additional information and you want to go in depth on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Anseli. So are there any questions or clarifications?
I do have questions. Sorry, I because it's organized by me, I cannot raise my hand. I have no hand to raise. So usually when we do the predictive model, we separate our data sets and then we train model on something, and then we use the remaining part to check whether it was correct. I'm just trying to understand how was it done during COVID-19, because there were no surveys even to check whether the prediction was correct or not.
Yeah. So that's why I say that if we had at this time the real-time data, we certainly produced far more robust burden estimates. But at this time, we only based our analysis on some admissions data we had from the last 5 years, but also on the latest prevalence data from nutrition surveys, so from nutrition survey from 2019. Since this was all the data we have at this time. I don't have yet all the admissions to make the comparison between the burden we calculated and the reality in terms of admissions, but we will do that. We will do this comparison as soon as possible when all the data will be completed.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Anthony. I thought I had seen Victoria's hand, or is it?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Anne-Céline. Just a quick question. So the predicted, the calculated burden that was issued, it was done so per country, but also per quarter. So it would give you an idea of how the calculated burden will, increase depending on seasonality. Is that correct?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, exactly. We try to adjust the incidence correction factor for food insecurity per quarter, and we found the methodology is a bit complicated to be explained for me in English, but yeah, we make some adjustment to take into account seasonal variation and COVID-19 on food insecurity and on acute malnutrition as well.
So in essence, you're looking, your model kind of adjusted an incidence factor based on all these inputs you had previously, and then adjusted that to the 2019 NNS data? Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. I think if there are no more questions, we could stop here. And we will take a 15-minute break. When we come back, we will be now kind of discussing the next steps. Anna had a presentation with some, towards the end of Anna's presentation, there was some questions which we feel will be helpful if this group can go over and see and address them and see what are some of the action points in terms of moving this forward. So, yeah, so I think it's about 9:26. So maybe if we're back by like 9, maybe we could just say 9:35, and then we can pick up from there. Anna, I don't know if you want to maybe just leave up the slide with some of the questions that we would want to address in the next session. So as colleagues are on their break, we could start thinking through some of them.
And I think.
Yeah, so there's a question from Alice. I think we'll probably come back and answer that during the discussions. We can start with that question.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So let's see each other at 9:30. I'm assuming this is our time. Yeah, maybe 9:40, which is basically 13 minutes from now.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Luis, Hassan, I'll just take you to another room.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is really, it is an open session and we really want to hear from you because given the experience in some of the initiatives that have been shared and that you colleagues have been involved in, it will really be useful to hear in terms of things that we need to think about critically to move this work forward. Anna gave a presentation of what we envision as part of the GNC in terms of using this predictions and forecasting for us to be able to have information in these fragile contexts that's required to obviously improve our efficiency and programming. So on the screen, I think we'll first start with the first question is, which I think we tackled a little bit in terms of when we were giving feedback. So does the presented approach that has been shared by Anna, does this make sense to colleagues? Are there additional questions or things that we need to be able to consider? Please feel free to raise your hand or even just mention in the chat box. We'll look at that closely.
We have Mara.
Okay. I can't see Mara. Do go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, thank you. And I mean, maybe just to make a start, I mean, on especially does the presented approach make sense? I mean, I think it's quite aligned, a lot of it, to what we were trying to do here. You know, to have those predictions available on a more regular basis, you know, without the need always to do a lot of surveys. And for small areas, and especially so that we would have that information available in areas that are more emergency affected or conflict affected, and you know, including for places that do a lot of surveys in order to maybe reduce a little bit the amount they have to do. I think there will still be a need for surveys, but maybe not quite so many. And then in those countries that don't do a lot, in order to improve the availability of data that they have. So I mean, I think if I understood it right, I think it's quite aligned, and it would be great to discuss further how we can work together to kind of move forward and maybe improve from where we've got to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mara. That was very clear. Eileen?
Hi, everyone.
I hope I said your name right.
Yes, it's Ellen. That's fine. That's perfect. Very similar to the point that Mara had raised from Miriam's perspective at Action Against Hunger. We would really encourage you to build on a lot of the work that has been done, especially by the Miriam Project, because there are so many similarities that I see in kind of what you're intending to do with what we tried and tested in the Miriam Project. And we have seen really good progress before in a way that I don't think we anticipated. So I'm hoping that we can find a way to work together. And just to recap, kind of Miriam has gotten to the point where we can do kind of these validated prospective forecasts. That's what we're working on right now. We're able to look at individual level risk of acute malnutrition as well as population prevalence. And as long as we overlay that with population, we can very easily translate it into caseload. We've looked at both MUAC and weight for height across 3 different methodologies, and we have seen significant potential to look at the lead time for 1, 6, and now even kind of 8-month lead time. And we do think that is a good next step forward. It is kind of building into these national level systems around this point here, around kind of continuous data streams, where there are existing systems that can be readily linked in to apply that data. That's really what we see as kind of the next phase, hopefully, for the Miriam Project. And it would be great to see what's possible there. A couple things to just kind of point out here. The first is around the causal framework. We had a lot of discussion around this 4 years ago when we first started, and the nutritionists in the room wanted to use the causal framework to kind of identify what we thought the drivers were. We went back and forth, and we decided at the end of the day, as long as the forecasts are coming out with a good degree of accuracy, a good degree of precision, the causal framework might not actually matter. So we kind of started approaching even data that we thought could be aligned, but not necessarily going into the weeds on the conceptual framework per se, rather than just kind of just focusing on the data that had the stream that we needed and trying to use that as a starting point. I would also encourage you to think through how this is going to be used and by whom very specifically now, and the type of performance they would need to be able to use it. That is going to determine whether this sits on a shelf, as we see with the Miriam project, or whether it can actually be integrated. And that really needs to be from the design stage. And then lastly, there has been progress on the food security side, but also kind of very big limitations. So I know a lot of the presentations you had focused on acute malnutrition specifically, but there are other things out there like the FAM. There's work being done by Cornell University, University of Texas at Austin. We've brought them together on our tag, and we'd be very happy to make the connections to kind of expand out the learning on the food security side from what we know of.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's really some great points, and you know, yeah, really great points. And yes, I think certainly would be interested in making those connections to see how we can continue to learn from colleagues that have already moved forward with this work. Thank you so much. Are there any other points? And you've touched on quite a number of the questions that we had up on the screen, but that's okay. Any other colleagues that would want to come in and maybe just give some additional thoughts to any of the issues that have been highlighted? Questions, sorry, not issues. Yes, Said.
Thanks. So yeah, I thought the approach made sense, and it had its strengths and maybe a few weaknesses depending on context. But I thought overall it made sense, especially if like your goal is like this real-time monitoring of the situation, like you want a monthly update on what's going on. One thought, I guess I had two thoughts on that. One is like I know the LSHTM presentation that was done earlier by Mara, like they were quite comprehensive. I thought in listing quite a bit of data sources that you could get regularly. I'm wondering if that can tie in quite well to your satellite imagery and where available social media content. Like they had a quite, I thought, comprehensive list of, like, even in the South Sudan context or Somalia, like you can get this kind of information. You can still get market information, program information, etc. So that might help give you more information on different causal pathways, different things that are happening to cause malnutrition to help pick it up. And the only other thought I had was, I don't know if this is maybe, I don't know if we're going like question by question on these 6 things, but if the aim of this, as I understood, was more real-time monitoring, have you guys thought about maybe not so much trying to predict like the GAM itself, even though that's what we really want, the GAM, but what about the nutrition admissions? Because I see there being a strength trying to predict something like new OTP admissions on a monthly basis, because we have it's such a regular data source, and it's a time series. You can actually, there's seasonality to it. It might be easier to predict something with that, or it might be easier to map that against some of these things if you're trying to do real-time monitoring. I think, again, someone please correct me if I'm saying something completely off base, but that's just my thought. Over.
Thanks, Said. And I think that's a very interesting question. Are there any other colleagues, or Anna, would you want to just take this point that was raised on maybe not looking at predicting the outcome itself, but maybe certain output indicators, which would more or less be indicative of some of the outcomes, like I'm
personally open to anything. So whatever makes sense, I see value in both. And I think it's not only, we're not only looking at prediction, like a now time prediction, but I think there is also value in an advanced prediction over several months, 3 to 6 months, because that would allow us to actually target our response better. And yeah, so for us, somebody made a comment that at least Aileen, I think, that we need to have in mind our audience. we do have in mind our audience. I think we are very audience driven, because for us it's a cluster or sector coordination teams. It's the people and partners together with them. It's the people who need to make decisions, like CUTAP, for example. They needed to make decisions. They didn't have data, so they had to develop the whole model for South Sudan, but then not everybody can do that. Yeah, so, and there is definitely value in both prediction of GAM and program data admissions as well.
Yeah,
and there are 2 hands already.
And I think this is a valid point. Sorry, maybe just to jump in and then I'll move to the hands. But I think this point that was raised about whom and the audience, I think as we move forward is something that we need to also consider. Yes, it's obvious that we will be targeting, you know, the countries and the cluster coordinators to do this work. But I think it's also important to recognize the partners, the donors, I mean, also those people who are going to be funding some of these programs moving forward. Are they also going to be having the confidence in the prediction and the models and all that work that has been done to be able to also invest in the funding? And that will mean donor partners, you know, governments where they exist, because they also need to have the same level of confidence for them to make the decisions. So I think as we think about this is a very important point for consideration moving forward. Okay, sorry, there were 2 hands.
Elisa
and yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, yes. Yeah, just maybe one further consideration to add. I mean, it's not really, I don't know if it's really a discussion question, but maybe something that I think it's very important for you to take into account, that is like the infrastructure, all the data infrastructure, etc. So all the things that like the proposed project sounds really interesting and well thought. I would just like from my experience, yeah, like something that normally maybe is not taken into account at first, or at least like we underestimate, right, how much work and resources it will require. But I think it's very important to build a solid infrastructure from the very beginning, like to collect and structure all the data, and also like very importantly, like if you want to use the model in near real time, then you will need to set up a system so that you know, like the data can flow in sort of automatically, or at least you'll be able to update it easily, even manually, but like on a regular basis. So like when you build your model, also make sure that you're using data that will be available later as well, right? So if it's historical data, then gets updated every few years, then maybe there's no point in using it, because then if you want to apply your model next year, the new data is not available yet, right? So all these kind of things that maybe when you are in model training and validation phase, you don't realize immediately, because maybe you have the data available, but then yeah, like always maybe keep in mind that all that data that you're using, you're gonna need it on a near real-time basis, and so for that you need data sources that get updated frequently, or at least regularly, and also an infrastructure that can support that. So I would just add this, yeah, as a sort of a suggestion, or one of the things that you will need to yeah, to think about. And then on the, also, sorry if I can add a second thought, and thinking about like the structured versus the unstructured data. So using also social media listening or this kind of things. I think that's yeah, that's definitely very interesting. I don't know if maybe I would recommend like a phased approach, where you first try out, you know, like building on the experience that has been, you know, proposed also in yeah, like by colleagues here. So first, the first version of the model where you have like more traditional structured data, and then once you have a basis, then see if you can improve that, or yeah, like extend the scope by also like trying out these other different approaches.
Thank you so much, Elisa. I think you raised some important points. One, on the infrastructure, I think this is a very, very important point. Just ensuring that we actually do have the data, and of course the quality of the data. So I guess this just really underlines that as much as we're doing all this work to move forward with the models, predictions, and so on, is that, you know, we really need to keep in consideration, and I think keep putting forward the issue on investing in the NIS systems. So just to make sure that we have those basics around generation of timely and quality information that could feed into these models. So I think those are good points. Kutab, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Luis. So first, I really like the way Anna presented. I like the approach. It's absolutely like were right on the mark. What was in my mind, and she actually presented very well. So I have like 3 different points. Number first is when we talk about modeling. So we were discussing about 2 modeling now. Initially, we were saying that we were planning that maybe our outcome will be acute malnutrition like GAM and SAM. And then we say that, okay, we need something which can also help us to predict, like maybe caseload, admission in new and some kind of or forecasting. So the first thing about like, you know, when we are sitting here and we know that different countries have different context. So I think the good start already, some of these colleagues already have taken, like in my project, she already listed the data sources there. Now, the way what I feel like we can move. So if, for example, if we have historical data in one point and we say that, okay, these are our different indicators, and then in that time, we also have like our game right there for a specific time period. And then in the second phase, maybe you will not have data, then we can come to the approach, what Anna mentioned about the unstructured data scraping, like web scraping, taking data from Google and from tutors and different things. And if we can also use that one, this would be really helpful. And I strongly believe, like the way Mara was presenting, I think that and even the Miriam one, they have that potential in those projects that they can do that. But what will be like if we are sitting here, and I think we need to start from somewhere. So I believe like already these 2 projects, they have done a lot. Now let's where this was in my mind, that to see what comes from this like Mara project, the way they are doing here for Somalia and South Sudan. And if we can see, and if we can build on that one later on, the possibility is there. In many other countries, maybe the data sources, some data sources will be not available. Maybe they will have different data sources. So then that time we will do flag and unflag there. We will bring more variables there. And then we can also, the way Anna mentioned, the web scraping is, I believe, like even in one other project, this was also mentioned there. This is very important thing, and we can use, I think, this web scraping, this Google downloading and this harvesting is very important. Now come for admission trend. The admission trend, I guess, if you have a strong system, data system, the prediction now is become very easy. Maybe in that case, you will not require that much indicator or that much like time, the way we are doing here. Like for South Sudan now, we have like system data, so we can easily see forecast our data. We can easily give you like trend, okay, next few months the admission will be likely like this, because we have almost now for 6 or 7 years admission data we have. So that one is maybe not much that much difficult, but the GAM rate and SAM rate is a bit tricky one, and I think already our colleague did a lot of good work on that. So over to you, Luis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kuthab. I think that's also very clear, and very helpful. Certainly, we would want to be building on the experiences that have come from all the presentations that were made. So I'm just trying to see, is there any other colleagues with any inputs?
No, we don't have any hands raised.
Okay. Okay, I think the points that have been raised have really targeted more or less not just one question, but have addressed a number of questions that have been put up in terms of if the approach makes sense. I think also the issue on the feasibility of the outcome to select if it's GAM. I think some of these thoughts have also been shared. There are 2 points which I guess are more technical around the use of continuous data to look at the outcomes and what accuracy and lead time we could realistically achieve. Maybe on this, and also maybe let me just add the admin level that we would want to look at in terms of predictions. These are more kind of technical questions that that we have been raised. I don't know if there are any thoughts specifically on these kind of 3 technical areas before we kind of go into the next question in terms of the next steps, because I think that can be handled separately. Yes, Saeed, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, maybe just a brief comment on the question about defining the problem as a regression problem.
Yes.
Just when you say that, then we're talking about logistic or linear or some kind of multivariable regression. I think from what I've been understanding about these techniques and how they relate to malnutrition, I see that because malnutrition is so complicated, and there's a lot of interactions going on. There's a lot of nonlinear relationships between different predictors that tell whether a kid's going to be malnourished or not. That it seems to me that regression maybe can't capture those as well. As I understand it, there are some machine learning techniques that are just better at innately capturing some of these things. Like, for instance, the random forest machine learning algorithms appear to be better at this. So I mean, in the forest performed better. We saw in a paper in Bangladesh where they tried to do the same thing with DHS data. Random forest was the best. I see in Elisa's work and in the I think in the LSHTM work, they're using random forest as well. So that might be the way more to go, or even in other methods that can take into account these very complicated interactions between lots of things that I don't think regression can do as well, unless somebody can please correct me on that as well. But things like neural networks and deep learning, these other things that I'm saying the words, but don't understand them perfectly. But I understand that these techniques are better at capturing these kind of things, and these kind of things seem to apply to trying to predict acute malnutrition a little bit better, I think. So that's all I wanted to add. Sorry. Over.
Okay, thanks, Saeed. I think that's noted and clear, especially for those who are more familiar with the technicalities of this kind of work. Elisa also has her hand up.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, if I can quickly jump in to elaborate also on Said's point. Well, I don't want to go too much into technical details, but I think so regression as a framework is what we exactly what this would be. So if GAM is a prevalence between a percentage of people that are malnourished between 0 and 1, or between 0 and 100, let's say, then I mean the framework of regression is the correct one, I think, and we want to have the framework of logistic regression. So want to predict something between 0 and 1. We had a slide earlier, sorry, can't remember exactly who was sharing it, but where this was clearly yeah, there was this example of the logistic regression where you would see that that's the kind of framework that applies to this kind of metrics. Now, sorry, Anna, it was not in your presentation; it was a previous one. Yeah, and then but building on what Said was saying, so then I think what you were referring to is more than we can go beyond just linear regression and use, like, for example, models like random forest. They are techniques like more elaborated techniques to perform tasks as classification, regression, etc. So I think logistic regression, if we're predicting something like GAM, is the right framework. And then the second step is to decide, okay, so what's the best algorithm or like learning method that can be applied to do this logistic regression, let's say. So yeah, just to clarify, I would say these are two separate questions. One is yeah, the kind of outcome, and the other one is what technique we use to get there. And I agree with Said that yeah, like most likely a linear approach won't be enough because of all the variables at stake. Possibly we don't just have like linear interactions among them, and so like an approach like yeah, random forests or this kind of things would allow for to capture some yeah, some better, not better, but sorry, some more complicated, let's say, or complex interaction among the different variables. The only issue is that like as you go with more complex models, then you also need to make sure that you have enough data to train the model. Otherwise, you risk like the model is not really able to learn anything. It needs much more information, let's say, than just a simple linear regression. Over.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you so much. That was Elisa. Thank you. Do I see? I'm just also trying to see if I have any colleagues with their hands up. Yes, Victoria, please go ahead.
Yes, perfect. It's more of a question back to, you know, maybe Elisa, Said's, you know, people who have much more experience, and it might seem a bit
Sorry, Victoria, it's very difficult to hear what you say.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Better? No?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's faint. Yeah.
Okay, let me see. Is this better? Apologies.
Yes, it's
yes?
clear.
Okay, great. Thank you. So my question is, the colleague from Atari that presented on day one was introducing the swarm analysis. And if we're talking about the, you know, the random forest as an algorithm, perhaps that my understanding was the swarm analysis would also be another type of algorithm. And I just wanted to gauge, would that be something that could be feasible for this, our goals here, or do the colleagues don't think that would be applicable? And maybe just to hear thoughts. Over.
I think so.
Can I respond to this one?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
so actually, yeah, my comments was on Elisa one. So Said were actually basically he was trying to say that that, you know, sometimes this linear logistic regression, when you check on the base of accuracy, is not working better than random forest or SVM, and we have also seen that. So also connecting this question to the other one, now the colleagues say that, so you know, it depends. In many areas we need to test this one. We can't say that this one is better. Now in some data sets, one algorithm is doing better, and the other one is different algorithm is working better. And we have seen that, like for nutrition, what we have seen that myself and Said, we were looking to all these models, and we have seen that in many areas people use like random forest. And random forest, when we were even checking on our own data, the accuracy was much higher than logistic regression or in the SVM, though we did not try neural network. And that is also one of the model I think we need to give try to that one. And I have seen one other colleagues also try another one. I forget the name of that model, that algorithm. But yes, this is a different algorithm, and we can test these algorithm on the basis of their accuracy. And when the accuracy, we will choose that one which have like a better accuracy than others. Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Kutab. I think just in terms of the different models that have been presented, and I think there's need for us to maybe have more in-depth discussions with data scientists and the researchers who have really gone deep into this exercises of identifying or defining these models, and then hopefully get more detailed guidance on which ones would work in which context. I think that's kind of what I would recommend for that point. In relation to the admin levels, I would say, a baseline or a starting point would be where we as a sector or the cluster, what are the admin levels that we would be wanting to get information for. I think we do have some clarity on that. It's now trying to also understand what is possible with these prediction models in terms of getting the information at the levels that we're looking for. From the presentations we've seen, there's individual level, there's more country level, district. More or less all the levels have been somehow defined. I think maybe taking a few seconds just to maybe discuss that a little bit more would be quite beneficial. I see that Eliza and Ellen have their hands up. Maybe, I don't know if Eliza, this was a previous hand or it's actually in response to now.
Yeah, it was just quickly in response to the question on the swarm AI approach. Just my understanding of what the IPC Atari people are trying to do is that like it's sort of a very different task. Like here, what we want to do is like we have some nutrition data, right, for like historical data, and we want to try and see if by using other contextual variables and inputs we can try to predict or even forecast those values of malnutrition, right? Whereas in what you're trying to do with the IPC, like that's really sort of completely different kind of task, in the sense that what they do is that they put people sort of in front of a computer so that they can interact at the same time, and so it's more of an algorithm that, like, so for example, if we were to want to reach a consensus on what we think is the current level of malnutrition in a given place right now or in 3 months, then each of us would tell the machine a value, and then the machine would tell us where, like, like what the average value that we gave is, and then we can change our estimate based also on what other people were saying, etc. So I don't know if this was clear as well, but at least this is my interpretation of what they're doing. So in terms of process, data, etc., it's a sort of completely different thing.
Great, thank you for that clarification, Eliza. Ellen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just to kind of double down on the point of encouraging you to try to articulate exactly how you think that this is going to be used, because I think it does relate to this question around kind of the type of methods that you would need to address it and the potential of those methods to answer those questions. So this was a huge point of learning that we've gotten to on the Miriam project. There's a big difference between looking at modeling for forecasting, trying to get out 6 to 8 months ahead of a crisis for kind of anticipatory preventative action. For that, we've come to a kind of a good understanding that it appears having good precision and accuracy around phases 2 and 3 is likely sufficient enough to kind of better pre-position some type of resources, whether that be data collection or kind of products or a whole bunch of other interventions. It seems like the 2 to 3 is sufficiently good enough in terms of the phases that we would be predicting to make better decisions. And we've seen that both in terms of the econometric modeling as well as the agent-based computational modeling. Although the agent-based computational modeling does kind of give us a more insightful analysis to break down the black box of what actually might be going on. One of the severe constraints that we've seen, especially in the food security space, but also in the Miriam project, is trying to predict phases 4 and 5. So if what you're trying to do is trying to get it kind of more real-time analysis in data poor environments for these kind of more severe crises, that is a nut that I don't know has been cracked yet. So you might want to think about kind of out of the box methodologies or something that hasn't been done before to be able to address it. But I do think that we've seen good progress on the forecasting for potential early action side.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ellen. Some very key points that you raised.
Sorry, on this, can I just ask
Yes,
something
Anna.
because it's on this? Thanks. So my understanding then, Kutab, because you are based in South Sudan and I didn't look in details in your results, that much of your results would be actually in the phases 4 and 5, and it kind of worked. I think it's question to Kutab.
Kutab, can you?
I think you're muted, Kutab.
All right.
Or maybe Saeed.
Yes, now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, that was me, Saeed. I don't know where Kutab went, but maybe he'll come back in a second. But just I can answer that briefly. We think more or less it worked. We had the historical data that we used to try to make our model to predict. Then we had the household data that had all the same variables, but without anthropometric data, and we used that to make the prediction. We think it worked, but of course, it's not validated. We don't have real anthropometric data to compare our prediction against, but when we compare it against historical data and looking at the known shocks like flooding and conflict that have affected certain areas, we broadly thought it was getting the right gist. I think that much I can say. I think we only showed two.
Sorry, Said. Go ahead.
Real time, as in they collected the data for this FSNMS we predicted on in September, and then the IPC was at the end of October, and we made the predictions like around that time. So more or less, it wasn't like something we did on a monthly basis. Real time, it was like within 4 to 6 weeks after that data was available. That's when we had done that work.
Thank you for clarification, because so I'm trying to just triangulate between these two approaches. So Miriam can predict GAMS at about between 5 and 15 with a lead time of 3 to 6 months, and then the South Sudan model can predict GAM kind of, let's say.
Yeah, the South Sudan model wasn't trying to predict in the future. It was just trying to fill like a real-time information.
Yeah.
Nowcasting, exactly. No, we're not claiming, we weren't trying to do any kind of 3 to 6 month prediction as the Mariam project is doing.
Okay, thanks. So for us, and if we are taking in mind cluster coordinators, but then whatever cluster coordinators need, it's also usually what donors and partners and everybody else needs. Sorry, I forgot to switch on my video. So I would think that we still need to have both. So we need to have what is the real time. Well, the prediction 3 to 6 months would be probably the best approach. For now, how we do, because we do smart surveys, which we even don't do in real time, and we get data in a few months, and then based on it, we try to predict what will happen. But in this situation, we just assume that the same gum rate, for example, would be throughout the year, unless there are some reasons to think that it's not. So if whatever reason, whatever solution we go, we will still have to change how we view at our planning and how we approach it, which means that potentially we can go with any approach, whatever works better, right? It's an open question, especially that we have regional advisors with us.
I don't know if somebody else wants to say something. I feel like there's no need. I feel like Elisa maybe made a comment earlier, but there's no need, I think, to limit ourselves to any one approach. We can try many things and see what works better. And I mean, there's different applications. I think what we tried to do in South Sudan and what the LSHTM team were doing was more nowcasting. And that has different applications maybe for trying to fill information gaps now that, like, for example, in a context where you don't have access in a lot of places, maybe nowcasting where you have some information but not nutrition information, it could be more applicable there. But then for sure in a real-time monitoring, trying to get ahead of the situation, like the forecasting models like Mariam's doing would definitely be more applicable. And I apologize if I'm just saying those two examples. I know Mariam is doing a much wider body of work as well, probably also with nowcasting applications. So I don't mean to, I don't mean to misspeak if I did at all. Sorry. Over.
Thanks, Said. Yeah. So I also think that the more we try, the better to one extent. But also, if we start modeling based on what was already done by many of you. Now the other approach of being focused on the audience, I don't, and I see Eileen has her hands up. I don't think that it would much intervene with trying to narrow down that, but correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, Eileen didn't have her hands up.
Sorry, I just had it up from before. I mean, we're happy to go into more detail on the Mariam project with you. I think it's a good time. The project only has a month left, so we're wrapping things up right now, and it might be useful just to bring you more up to speed in detail instead of a 20-minute presentation. So we would be happy to do that to the extent that it's useful.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just looking in at the time, and I think we have reached the end of this session, unless there are critical points, anyone with a really critical or burning point that they would need to raise. And I think as we've been having this discussion, we've been thinking through some of the key points that we would need, key points and activities that we would need to take note of as we put the way forward. So at this point, maybe Anna, I would like to just hand it over to you in terms of maybe just defining what are some of the key next steps and action points that we have picked from this last conversation, but also through the 2 days in terms of how we would position ourselves to move forward. So Anna, over to you.
Thank you very much. My understanding was that Hassan was going to do that. So Hassan, he already switched on the video.
Oh, okay. Great, Hassan, over to you.
Yeah, so thank you, Louise and Anna. I think we, as you mentioned, Louise, we've had really two days of very fruitful discussions. The intent, as I think it has been mentioned several times now, was first to try to really understand what is out there, what different actors, different partners are working on in relation to AI algorithms that are aiming to predict, either food security or specifically nutrition outcomes. And I think we between these 2 days, we've learned quite a lot about what's out there. We also wanted to bring this, group experts together to share experiences, and as well to see how we can leverage on each one of your expertise to really build something that would be quite beneficial and sort of unified in us addressing the problems of nutrition and nutrition information. So some of the key sort of next steps. One is we would like to, or we're going to form a task force that would be working on predictive analytics on nutrition information. This task force would be part of the Nutrition Information Systems Working Group, which is part of the Global Nutrition Cluster Technical Alliance. We would like to invite you all to be part of this task force. We believe that each one of you has a role to play and a part to contribute towards building this system that we're working on. The second one is that we would be working on sort of leveraging on the existing presentations and models that have been presented here to maybe fine-tune, refine them, define them differently, and make sure that we're getting the different outcomes as that would be of interest to the nutrition sector and our partners as a whole, as well as the donor community, and also most importantly bridging the gap that we see in terms of making sure that no child is left behind. In light of that, we would also be embarking on a sort of resource mobilization exercise. Would be sort of making sure that we have the resources and the infrastructure required to really make this now from discussion to operationalizing it and putting it sort of out ready for use. So we will be sort of contacting you directly with invitations to be part of this task force. We'll also have some bilateral discussions with some of you to discuss the different models that you've presented and see how we can work together to make this a success. I don't know if I'm missing anything else, Anna, but yeah, I think it's probably the wrap up that I had from my side.
Thank you so much, Hassan. Sorry, go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, so it would be good to get some indication from the colleague who are here, whether they would be interested to collaborate together in this work. And yeah, we will of course send an invitation via email, but just to get some understanding.
I mean, I would assume that all of you are interested unless you state otherwise. But yeah, so we will definitely do follow-up emails with specific requests. But as of the moment, we are making a very general assumption that everyone is on board. which is exciting to us, and we're very happy about that. But yeah, so definitely we're seeing, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of people on the chat box already saying they're very interested. So that's great news. If there is nothing else, I would then say that this really brings us to the end of our workshop. I really want to thank all of you for your time, your contributions, the very fruitful discussions that we've had over the last two days of having this workshop. I have personally learned a lot about what is currently happening in the space of artificial intelligence, what the potential is, and the possibilities of us really making something that's quite interesting and very, very useful in the field, and bridging really a gap that we know is out there. There's a lot of opportunities to leverage on what is currently existing, what has been done. We're not reinventing the wheel in any way or form. I think by putting all our heads together, we will come up with something that is really beneficial and useful. So again, thanks to everyone. Thank you to my co-chairs, Anna, Louise, Victoria, Douglas, who was not able to be with us here. We've been in a very small group trying to make this a reality, and with the able leadership of Anna, we're actually making significant progress. So thanks to all of you again, and have a good day, evening, night, and thanks to those of you who joined from wherever you are, which is quite late, but we appreciate it a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Hassan.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.